Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If I may greet you with the greetings of peace, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May blessings of God be upon you. Welcome you all. I know it's treacherous outside with the snow, and it's been snowing since morning. So all of you guys who have made here, welcome, marhaba. And again, we are gathered here for this second year in a row, the World Interfaith Harmony Week that's happening. Some of us were here last year, and I was speaking to John just minutes ago and recalling it seems like yesterday it was here, and there were a lot more people here, and again the weather cooperated that year. But here we are, and I think the objective we are here is more important, and I think we will celebrate it together with whoever and more people would join, God willing. So we want to begin today's program, and before we begin, I just wanted to share something with you guys. Just puts the spirit in place as to why we are gathered here. A student once asked the master how he perceived different religions. He responded, different religions could be seen as twigs, branches, leaves, and flowers of the tree. They all stem from the same root. They all teach us to be sincere, pure, wise, and compassionate. The principles and methods of practice for different religions can coexist without conflicts. And when conflicts arise, it's man-made. It's simply because we have misinterpreted the holy teachings. And I think this, in essence, sums up why we are here. There are different religions, there are different schools of thoughts that are out there, but we are together in this journey on planet Earth as human beings. So we would want to begin today's program with some welcoming remarks by Mr. Mushtaq Khan, who is the President of the Islamic Supreme Council of Canada. We thank him for hosting us over here, so in this beautiful auditorium over here. So Mr. Mushtaq Khan, please.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, most magnificent. Assalamu alaikum and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Islamic Supreme Council of Canada, I would like to welcome you all in this beautiful gathering of celebrating the World Interfaith Harmony Week. Last year's event was a big success, and we have again gathered here today to continue the celebration. Although we belong to many different religions, faith and cultures, through events like these, we can prove that the common values and goodwill we share far outweigh our differences. Islamic Supreme Council of Canada and its chairman, Professor Syed Badiuddin Sohrawardi's mission is to create harmony and better understanding between different faith groups through interfaith dialogues, which he regularly takes part in. So far, he has participated in over 100 interfaith dialogues with different faith groups. In the year 2008, from April 20th to October 27th, Professor Syed Badiuddin Sohrawardi led the multi-faith walk against violence across Canada from Halifax to Victoria, BC. During his almost 6,500 kilometer, 6-month trek, not only did he speak out against violence and received support from thousands of Canadians across the nation, he also established a connection between many religious institutes. I am pleased that we are part of this interfaith group, which is working towards decreasing the barriers between the individuals of many different faiths and cultures that are present in our society. We should continue to work together, and I am sure that the time is not far away when we will be able to bridge the gaps between our religions and live in harmony together. Thank you very much, and let's continue the program.
Thank you, Mr. Mushtaq Khan, and thanks once again for hosting us over here for the World Interfaith Harmony Week. I think the program, if you guys have gone through the outline for the program, there are some interesting talks that we're looking forward to, some poetry that's on the agenda. There's some words of wisdom with the guitar. I'm personally excited for that, and some comedy time. So I think if Hamid Rashid is here, so I'm looking forward for that as well. So it should be a fun evening, and I know it's a smaller group, but that makes us cozy. We get to interact with each other and hopefully get to know one another. I'm looking forward to catching up with some of the friends that I met last year. So I would like to introduce now actually the person, one of the persons, whose vision is this, and we are running behind him, is Mr. John Vorpostel. I hope I pronounced it all right. He's here to speak to us about the World Interfaith Harmony Week. So without further ado, if I may ask John to please come up and share a few words with us.
Thank you very much. I was reading the newspaper this morning, and it was very, very timely. It said that we do not live in Canada. We live in winter. I don't want you to think that because there are fewer people here than last year that this is in any which way, shape, or form a failure or something that's a step backwards. I think that just the fact that you are here tonight speaks so much to the spirit that underlies World Interfaith Harmony Week. And as a steering committee, our vision was never to have this great, big, large success in the first year or the second year. We feel that this is like a very large wheel that we have to put our shoulders to and slowly, slowly start that big wheel rolling. And at one point, that wheel is going to start turning on its own as more people put their shoulder behind the wheel and as more people put their energy and faith into an organization like ours, which seeks to bridge the gap between people. Let me start by talking a little bit about someone I think who is very near and dear to your hearts. Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi lived from 1207 to 1273. He's known to the English-speaking world simply as Rumi. This 13th century Persian poet, jurist, theologian, and Sufi mystic wrote poetry considered to be the purest literary legacy of the Persian language. Rumi's work transcends time and geography and has been widely translated. In 2007, he was described as the most popular poet in America. He has handed us a message that still resonates today, and it's especially important tonight as we celebrate what unites us all. It reads like this as translated. One went to the door of the beloved and knocked. A voice asked, "Who is there?" He answered, "It is I." The voice said, "There is no room for me and thee," and the door was shut. After a year of solitude and deprivation, he returned and knocked. A voice from within asked, "Who is there?" The man said, "It is thee," and the door was opened for him. When we stop thinking of me and thee, the door opens to friendship and understanding and mutual respect. That is the heart of what World Interfaith Harmony Week seeks to achieve. For those who do not know, World Interfaith Harmony Week has its genesis in an October 2010 United Nations resolution, sponsored by His Majesty King Abdullah II of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. It seeks to promote the common basis of love of God and love of the good and love of the neighbor among everyone. Last year was our inaugural year, and we managed to help envision and organize and promote 2 events, as well as announce the week and its principles to the GTA. Our very first World Interfaith Harmony event ever was held in this here room. I think you should all be very, very proud of that. And I feel very, very privileged to be back here tonight where it all began. This evening's theme, Celebrating Interfaith Culture, is especially powerful, as culture is a unifying force. Think about the upcoming Olympics, the Super Bowl tomorrow, or Hockey Night in Canada. Think about the excitement of the Grammys for music or the Oscars for film buffs. And of course, the incomparable Rumi, whose wise words open my address to you this evening. This year we have grown to 5 events, and we were once again successful in having the City of Toronto officially proclaimed this week as World Interfaith Harmony Week in Toronto. Tomorrow we have an evening of music and stories. Monday there is an evening of Interfaith Dialogue. Wednesday there is a session on the state of Jewish-Christian relations. And on Friday night next week at the Newer Cultural Centre, there's a gathering of leaders of various interfaith groups. Now, if you're interested in learning more, we do have a website, interfaithtoronto.ca, and I invite you to look at it. I invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, which you can do from there as well. Now, I started by quoting Rumi, but Islamic culture has a rich tradition of folk stories that transmit life lessons and morals to guide us in our daily lives. And here's a favorite of mine. It's a story about the Mullah Nasruddin. Sometimes he's an idiot, other times he's sublime, but his adventures often carry morals and lessons like a fable from Essa, someone we as Western culture are probably more familiar with. Now, Nasruddin was invited by the lord of his city to visit him, and upon arriving, the lord suggested they stroll into the city incognito to see what it was like. Nasruddin readily agreed, and they went. People did not recognize the Lord and paid him no attention. But wherever they went, people smiled at Nasruddin and said hello. Upon their return to the palace, the Lord said, "Nasruddin, you've never been here before, but it seems everybody knows you. How's that?" "Why do you say that?" says Nasruddin. "Well, everybody smiled at you," said the Lord. "Ah, the answer is simple," said Nasruddin. "You see, I smiled at them." And I think that's a wonderful lesson for tonight. And I hope that before this evening is over, that you offer someone that you haven't met before a warm smile, a warm handshake, and take some time to get to know them, because that's, after all, what this week is all about. This past summer, the Toronto Area Interfaith Council hosted the North American Interfaith Network Conference, which I was privileged to attend as a delegate and as a presenter. And I was truly energized by what was going on in North America, and by the realization that we here in the Greater Toronto Area are recognized as one of the world's leading interfaith communities and a role model for others. Now, it's of course a reflection of our history and the vibrancy of the local interfaith community, who work together on various agendas through approximately 55 different interfaith organizations in the GTA. And so it has really created a fertile ground for something such as World Interfaith Harmony Week to emerge so quickly, from no event to 2 events to 5 events. It was our grandest dream last year, just to be able to get the news out and maybe, just maybe, have 1 event. And we ended up with 2, and this year with 5, and next year I know we will have more, because as I go around and speak to people, more people are energized, more people want to partake. It's too late for them when they find out, but they're going to be there next year. So I really truly believe that this week will grow. And although the steering committee, our steering committee, helps envision and coordinate and organize some of the events, many people beyond this steering committee make it all happen. So I first want to thank Zahid Rafiq for taking the lead this year again in organizing this event, and everyone involved in making this evening a welcoming event for all. I would like to thank the President of the Islamic Supreme Council of Canada in Mississauga, Mr. Mushtaq Khan, for his leadership in an organization so visible and ready to engage and to be engaged by the interfaith community. I wish to thank all the presenters this evening for sharing their special talents and their inspiring words with us. But mostly I want to thank you. I want to thank you sitting in the chairs tonight. Because Interfaith Harmony is driven by people like you, through your continued interest, your support, and your activity. And it's because of you that a week like this can happen. And for this and for you all, I'm truly grateful. And I encourage you to keep living these principles, to keep reaching out to the other, to offer a vigorous hospitality to the other, and to keep in mind what Rumi said, there is no room for me and thee. Thank you.
Thank you again, John. Thank you for your leadership and your vision. And I think to drive home the point there, and I think I would ask each and every one of you, including myself, that before we leave tonight, let's try to meet each other. Let's try to meet each other with a smile and try to exchange contact information so we can stay in touch. I think that's the beauty of these events, that we are able to exchange ideas, not just today, but over the course of the year. So let's continue on with the program. We have one of our beloved teachers from the city, one of the leading scholars, who's also the imam, the preacher for this masjid, for this mosque, who's here with us, Imam Muhammad Mahmood, who is here with us, and he would be speaking to us about the sanctity and unity of religions. Imam Muhammad Mahmood.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Welcome to all of you. It's an honor and a privilege to be a part of this fantastic initiative. It's an initiative that's imperative, it's important, because the voices of divisiveness, the voices of division are so potent and so powerful, and the consequences of their dialogue, the consequences of their preaching, the consequences of their actions affect all of us. Now, in trying to create this unity between ourselves, between the various communities, between the various faith groups, at times we are, in our own independent communities, accused of being unorthodox, accused of being fringe, accused of being unauthentic. And so what we want to try to address is the transcendent unity of religion as justified by religion and as justified by pure metaphysics, to create the grounds for this sort of coexistence, to create the grounds for this sort of unity. It is not a fabricated unity. It is actually the reality. The voices of divisiveness are the delusion that many of us are being forced to suffer. Now, to begin, we talk about primordiality, what we call fitra in the Arabic language. That innermost condition of the primordial human being. There are some things that are unique to us on that sort of universal level. And here we find tremendous relation with one another. There is, for starters, the reality of intellection, our ability to know as human beings, the recognition of truth, which is unique to all of us and uniform between us. Every human being of sound mind and heart is able to recognize truth, and there is no monopolizing of truth. It isn't mine. It doesn't belong to any particular group. It doesn't belong to any particular religion exclusively. To speak about this, the late Frithiof Schuon, rahmatullah alayh, he brilliantly said this. He said, our starting point are religions that exclude one another, talking about the religious community worldwide. He said, our starting point is religions which exclude one another. He said, logically, this would mean that either one is right and the rest are wrong, or in fact that they are all wrong. Why? Because they are mutually exclusive. He says the reality is that they are rather all true. Not in their dogmatic exclusivism, but in the inner signification of these religions which corresponds with pure metaphysics, which corresponds with pure objectivity. Here, on this level, on this plateau, there is a real, unquestionable unity that we are all able to recognize. That's the ability of intellection that the human being has. And the inability or the unjustified nature of any monopolizing claim of that truth by any individual or any particular group. Likewise, or as a flip side of that very coin, the recognition of falsehood. We all have the ability to recognize false and to discern that which is false. And that is not something that is unique to me or to any particular religion or to any particular group or any particular community. Insofar as it is a faculty and a capability, a capacity for the human being to recognize falsehood. Then the ascertaining of the absolute, which is, at least in Islamic theology, is one of the principal purposes of the creation itself, is the ability of the human being to recognize absolute reality. The ability of the human being to recognize absolute reality through the observation of relativity. I'm a fan of astronomy. We are on a very small, very beautiful, but very small planet in orbit around the sun, medium size, it's not very big, in an arm of a much larger galaxy, lovingly call it the Milky Way. And that galaxy is quite far from its sister galaxy, the very closest galaxy, Andromeda, which is very far away. Many of us will never be able to reach it, if any of us. I'm speaking very hopefully. And that galaxy and many others form a large, magnanimous cluster of galaxies. And that cluster is a speck of dust in intergalactic space and forms a much larger group called a supercluster of galaxies. We are very, very small and very relative. The recognition of that, that's not very far. You just have to step outside and look up. It's literally that close. That is supposed to drive home something to the human being, the relativity. And if relativity is recognized, then absolute reality may be also recognized. That you are not the author of truth, you are not to dictate it either. Again, there's no monopolizing. That's intellection. On the level of moral intuition, which is a completely different faculty which we have, we recognize both virtue and justice, equity. We recognize it. It's very simple. In fact, animals recognize it, not even human beings, because this is not unique to the intellecting animal only. I remember a very silly and very yet profound experiment that was done with small primates. They were given a task and and placed next to each other, two of them, and they were given a small task, and for performing that task they were giving a fruit of some kind. And the one of them performed the task and he was given a grape or something like that, and the other one did the same task and he was given a similar grape and he was happy. The other one again was told to do a task, but he was given a much larger fruit, and the other one saw that. And then he was incited to do the same, and he did it, and he came back expecting the larger fruit. but he was given a grape, and he threw a fit. He completely came apart. Recognizing the inequity, recognizing the injustice. We are no less. A human being can recognize injustice and is capable of recognizing it. And this is not unique to any community. It's not unique to any particular religion, and no one can monopolize this faculty either. This is something that we all have. Likewise, the recognition of liberty and its opposite, the recognition of oppression as an injustice, as the loss of equity. And most importantly, our intuitive and innate leaning towards equity, our own natural inner reality of wanting equity, of wanting justice, of preferring it, of not only recognizing it, but longing for it, not only for ourselves, but for everyone besides ourselves. This is found, of course, in the golden rule of Christ, and all of its various forms in the different religions. This is found in philosophical morality, like the categorical imperative of Immanuel Kant. The universalization of this desire for equity. Again, not unique to any individual, group, or religion. This is common to all of us. Also, aesthetic awareness. Our ability as human beings to recognize beauty. Our ability to see and interpret symmetry and meaning, not only in the horizons, in the world, but also in ourselves, within the human being. We are all able to do this. It's not an accident that Jalaluddin al-Rumi, who was a Persian, who lived many years ago, who was a Muslim jurist, is so appreciated in modern America. It's not an accident. Because the things that he's talking about are beautiful independently of time. And therefore they're recognized by so many. I just met Mary Frances, and she told me her name is Mary Frances, and she reminded me of St. Francis of Assisi. And I told her I was quite fond of him. Why? Because I found in him such sanctity and dignity, such dedication in his asceticism, that I found it beautiful and inspiring. He didn't have to be a Sunni, he didn't have to be a Muslim for me to recognize that beauty. This is real. That recognition of beauty is the very recognition of the divine infinitude. And our longing for beauty is our longing for happiness and felicity. We not only want to achieve that beauty, but we want to be it, and we also want to express it or manifest it, present it. This is why temples and synagogues and churches are some of the most beautiful architecture human beings have ever created. Religion seems to give rise to this sort of thing, despite what many people are accusing religion of being author of this day and age. Now, these things, these aspects give rise to our sense of the sacred, our sense of holy, our sense of something that is transcendent, something that is beyond me, something that is worthy of recognition and worthy of praise, something to long for. It creates idealism in the human being, beyond just realism and recognition of what is. But we start to recognize what ought to be, what should be, and we long for it. And again, this is not unique to any individual, community or congregation or church or religion. طيب. So far so clear. I hope I'm not boring you. طيب. Religions, so this, on this level, this is all primordiality. This is not religion as such. This is all not unique to any individual, but this is something humanly known. Which means in that category of recognition is not only included every religion, but also agnostics, atheists. I have many friends that are atheists. And I often tell them, the large majority, the vast majority of the things that you disbelieve in, I disbelieve in as well. And so much of the beauty and spirituality which you recognize in yourself, we also recognize in ourselves. But they often say, I'm spiritual, not religious. I say, I don't blame you. It's because they reject some things that they recognize to be questionable, oppressive, dangerous, harmful. But they did not abandon their own desire and aspiration for something beyond themselves, which is deeply human. But religion, on the other hand, can be recognized as having three fundamental aspects. Number one, the form. We all know this. We all have this in our communities. The form of a religion, which is its structure, its sense of moral responsibility, the canonical law, the covenant, the sacrament, the obligations of the various religions, the do's and the don'ts. Religions also have the doctrina. They have their tenets of faith, the belief system, what we convict our hearts of, what we dedicate our hearts to, those things that we hold to be most sacred. And religion also has a spiritual aspect, an inner dimension, something that pertains to the heart, something that is experiential, something that, and you might find in the Eastern religions, they speak about moksha or nirvana or the state of bliss, a state of actualization, enlightenment, etc., etc. It's no different in any other religion. The Kabbalist will tell you the same. The Christian, the friar will tell you the same. And the Sufi will tell you the same. There is the heart of religion, the spiritual reality which we all long for. These three aspects make religion in general. These aspects are uniform to religion. We all have them. And so it ought to be a point of recognition of one another as opposed to a point of division between one another. So where does the divergence occur? I'll go back to Shuan's statement. Our starting point is religions which exclude one another. They're all true, not in their dogmatic exclusivism. Not in their dogmatic exclusivism and rejection of the other. Not on the level of truth. Why? Because truth is not subjective. Truth does not belong to me. Truth doesn't have my name on it. Truth doesn't have Islam as a title. It doesn't. No Muslim can monopolize truth. The truth belongs to itself. And we, as potential recognizers of truth, can either belong to it or not. Not on the level, the divisiveness does not occur on the level of objectivity. And the objectivity to oneself, which is humility, or objectivity to one's neighbor, which is charity. Divisiveness does not occur there. Divisiveness does not occur on the level of virtue. We all know what is virtuous. We all know what we would prefer. We all recognize beauty. We all recognize the things to aspire to. We all recognize that which ought to be. So there's no divisiveness there, in principle. But the divisiveness occurs where? It occurs on the level of dogma. Now here I use the word in its etymologically sound sense, which is faith without justification. Faith without justification. That blind faith and insistence of its supremacy over all other potentially equally true positions. That's where decisiveness occurs between religions. The fallacious appeals to orthodoxy. The subjective appeals to orthodox truths. And the Sunni is right, the Shia is not. And the Seventh-day Adventist is not a Christian. And so on. This is all level of dogma. The relativity and all of its consequences when they are given supremacy over everything else. Failure to recognize the absolute is therefore putting the relative self in its place. This is one of three fundamental points of concern which we have with respect to this decisiveness that occurs between people, between communities, between religions. Number one is the inability to recognize the absolute, the inability or the refusal, more accurately, to recognize that transcendent reality that is not monopolizable, that you cannot claim to yourself exclusively. Failure to recognize that does what? It puts one's own subjective point of view in its place. And the result of that will be what? The various moral relativisms, the concepts of might is right, and all the danger that comes from it. The second is failure to recognize oneself. John was mentioning that statement from Jalaluddin al-Rumi. There's no space for you and I. There is no space for you and I. Why? Because you and I is relativity. On the level of absoluteness, yes, there's plenty of room for that. But relativity, no, it does not create. Why? Failure to recognize the absolute causes one to put his own subjective position in its place. It's the deification of your own subjectivity, the deification of your own unique position, which is arbitrary by and large. It's completely arbitrary. There's no reason why anyone is more right than anybody else without justification. And then it creates imposition, and it creates the various fanaticisms which we experience in our lives. Thirdly, it's the failure to recognize the meaning of life. I know it's a big word and it's overused and it's cliche. I don't mean any of the cliche meanings. But the failure to recognize the meaning of life insofar as the dignity of being the beings, the theomorphic beings, capable of recognizing the divinity, capable of recognizing the transcendent. Not recognizing the meaning of life, not knowing the meaning of life has consequences, which, as Shuan put it, it causes us to want to plunge into evanescent things with criminal unconsciousness, completely oblivious to dignity, to morality, to sanctity, to anything that is beyond ourselves. We're completely indifferent. So life has no value, therefore. And we see that in the mass shootings and the mass killings and the madness. It's hard to watch the news these days. Nothing has anything sacred about it. Suicides and destruction of temples and destruction of, books and knowledge and destruction of property. And nothing has any sanctity or worth or value. Why? Because we fail to recognize the absolute and therefore have put everything that is relative in its place. The result is the various addictions, mundanity, profanity, and the complete loss of dignity for an otherwise theomorphic being capable of angelic acts. We have to return from this condition. We have to avoid this condition. We have to go back to recognizing something that is not unique to any one individual group or one individual human being, to recognizing those principles that gave rise to religion, those principles that were known even prior to religion. Often I'm asked, how does one recognize a prophet from a charlatan? And says, because we know the truth a priori. And one who comes with the truth, we recognize to be prophetic. And one who comes with falsehood, we recognize to be a charlatan. But if that were not the case, there would be no distinction between the two. There would be nothing but covetousness. There would be nothing but subjectivity and fanaticism. This has to be rejected. I want to conclude with something I heard from my sensei, from my sheikh, my teacher. We were camping up north in Tobermory, in Bruce Peninsula. We have a lovely property there. And sometimes we go to the docks in Tobermory. So one afternoon, me and sheikh and many students, we took a ferry. It was, interestingly, the ferry was called Deep Meditations. I'm not making this up, really. And we went on this boat, lovely couple. He had actually built this ferry. It's quite substantial, beautiful boat. We docked off in the afternoon into Georgian Bay. And at the helm, Sheikh was speaking with the couple, beautiful people. And they're asking lots of questions. Sheikh is from Africa, he's North African. He's from an Arab culture. He's a Muslim, he's a jurist. They, on the surface or on paper, we would say, there seems to be tremendous difference between him and this lovely couple. But the more they talked, the more they felt there's absolutely no difference between us. So they said this to Sheikh. They asked me to translate. They said, tell Sheikh, we feel quite warm and close to one another. Is that usual? Even though you're a Sheikh and you're from elsewhere. And I said this to Sheikh, and Sheikh went like this. No. He said, tell them no. He says no. And they both took a step back, thinking he did not agree. He said, Muhammad, you told me they said we are like each other? I said, yes. He said, la. He said, tell them to ask me why. He says to ask him why. So they both looked at him and said, why, Sheikh? He said, because we're not like each other, we're exactly the same. We're exactly the same. He says, ask me why. He said, why? And he looked at them, he said, because, my dears, what benefits you benefits me, and what harms you harms me. That's real. Whatever causes you pleasure causes me pleasure, and whatever causes you pain causes me pain. That literally means that we are one and the same. So then I said, then why so much divergence between us? Why so much conflict? He said, because of subjectivity, because of people who did not recognize what we have recognized, because people are not living up to their own innate, primordial nature, which is to go beyond the subjective and to recognize the absolute truth, and that would cause them to want to will the good and to be beauty. We hope and we pray that God draws us near to that recognition and removes the barriers of falsehood and delusion from between us. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Imam Muhammad. I think he took us almost to a different level as we were, at least for myself, we were sitting through and imagining. And so thank you again for those inspirational words. And truly, I think that's the essence. At the end of the day, we are human beings, individuals, and we need to recognize that, especially in today's world where there's so much that divides us superficially. I think we need to go back to the roots, as Imam Muhammad was mentioning. A slight change in the program. I think before we get into the poetry, we have something from Hira Usman, Terrorism in the Name of Islam. So if I can ask Hira to please come up and share a few words with us.
It's fine. Okay. Yep. That's fine, right? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Hira, and I've been asked to speak on a topic related to Islam. So first of all, let me greet you all with the Islamic greeting. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon all of you. There were a couple of topics in my mind when I was asked to speak on Islam, but the one which I find most pressing, the one which I find to be the most important issue right now is terrorism in the name of Islam. I think it has become such a huge issue that because of this problem, it has eclipsed all aspects of Islam. What I want to state, first of all, and very clearly, that a terrorist is not a Muslim. Whoever terrorizes others, uses violence to fulfill his or her goals, is just a terrorist, nothing else. Why there's no place for such a person in Islam, I will prove by using the sources of knowledge that Muslims consider most authentic, that is the Quran and the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Quran clearly says, Allah does not love those who do fasad. Now, fasad is an Arabic word and it has several meanings, a few of which are murder, violence, evildoing, corruption. So the Quran says that Allah does not love a person who is a murderer, who does violence, who is corrupt. So if Allah does not love a person with any of these attributes, then how can He legislate terrorism that includes murdering people, which includes using violence to fulfill somebody's goals? How can Allah legislate this thing in His religion? The truth is that whoever uses terrorism in the name of Islam is just doing that to fulfill his own political motives, or they have misinterpreted some verses of the Quran. And I would say just a handful of verses, which if you look into depth are actually contextual, and you cannot generalize them over all times and spaces. On the other hand, there are so many verses in the Quran that endorse peace, like the one which I just mentioned. Also, Islam itself comes from a root word, salama, which means peace. So if a religion itself means peace, then how can it endorse violence? I believe the biggest form of violence is killing innocent people. Quran uses such powerful language to denounce innocent killing that it leaves no room for further argument. Quran says, if anyone kills a person, unless it be for murder or for spreading mischief in the land, it would be as if he killed the whole humanity. And if anyone saved a life, it would be as if he saved the life of the whole humanity. Now, killing for murder or for spreading mischief in the land, that is the job of the court to decide that. And it is the job of the government to give that punishment. So the rule that Quran sets for me is that if I kill somebody, it is as if I killed the whole humanity. On the other hand, a person who is oppressed by other people, the Prophet of Islam says, the prayer of an oppressed person, even though he be a non-Muslim, is heard by Allah directly without any veil. So if being a Muslim, I do acts of terrorism, then my Allah, my God, does not love me anymore. And a person who gets affected by me, even if he's a non-Muslim, is so close to Allah, is so dear to Allah, that Allah hears him out directly. As a believer of Islam, I have no choice to do terrorism on this earth, to do mischief on this earth. And it is extremely sad that some people who call themselves Muslims do not understand that. This reminds me that there was a group of so-called Muslims who emerged in the time of Ali, when Ali was the ruler. And these people, they used to consider themselves the best Muslims. And whoever they thought was not a good enough Muslim, or whoever did not agree with their point of view, these people would just kill him. It was as simple as that, just go and kill that person. So Ali, because they emerged in the time of Ali, let me just tell you a bit about Ali. He was a companion of the Prophet. He was also his son-in-law, and he was the person about whom the Prophet Muhammad said that he is the most knowledgeable person in Islam after the Prophet himself. So Ali said about these people that they have exited from the folds of Islam like an arrow exits the bow. How does an arrow exit the bow? It goes really fast, goes far, far away, most probably never to return. So these people who considered themselves to be the best Muslims were actually considered to be far outside the bounds of Islam by the knowledgeable companions of the Prophet. I believe the same holds true for the terrorists of today who consider themselves to be the real Muslims. There's another misconception about Islam today, that it is intolerant toward people of other faiths, and it wants to convert everybody left, right, and center. Sadly, it does hold true for the terrorists, because they're not just intolerant towards people of other faiths, but they're also intolerant towards other sects of Islam who do not agree with them. I don't understand, maybe these people never read the Quran, because the Quran clearly says, let there be no compulsion in religion. No compulsion in religion. These are exact words of the Quran. Let there be no compulsion in religion. This means that I have no right to impose my religion on others. This also means I have no problem in peacefully coexisting with people of other faiths. Regarding this, the Prophet said, a true believer is one with whom others feel secure. He also said, by God, he is not a believer with whom his neighbors are not secure. So peaceful coexistence with people of other faiths is such an important trait in Islam that without it, my faith is not complete. There are many incidents in the life of the Prophet in which he showed extreme kindness towards people of other faiths. But the one which I find most astounding is the conquest of Makkah. Makkah was the city in which the Prophet was born and raised, and this was a city from which his own people threw him out of. In Makkah, the early followers were extremely tortured, and the small group of Muslims were sent into exile by the people of Makkah. Due to the people of Makkah, the Prophet's wife Khadija and his uncle died. So after a couple of decades, when Muslims returned to Makkah as conquerors, they could have done anything to take revenge. But what we see in history is a totally different picture. Before entering the gates of Makkah, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said to his own followers that no woman, child, or an old person should be harmed. When he entered the gates of Makkah, he said to the Meccan people, whoever goes in their homes is safe. Whoever takes refuge in the house of Allah is safe. Whoever takes refuge in the house of Abu Jahl, one of the Meccan leaders, is safe. So there was no might shown as conquerors. There was no revenge taken. Frankly, I can't think of a more peaceful conquest in the history of mankind than this. And this is a benchmark that my Prophet set for me with regards to kindness towards people of other faiths. It is extremely sad that the terrorists who call themselves Muslims do not understand the teachings of the Prophet and the verses of the Quran. But again, there are extremists in every group. There are odd ones out in every religion. And though they might be small in number, but they affect the image of the whole community. What I just want to say in the end is that the majority of the Muslims do not agree with the views of these killers. In fact, consider them far outside the bounds of Islam. Though I don't need to say this, but the rest of us are a very peaceful and loving people, because this is what our religion has taught us. Thank you.
Thank you, Hira. I think those words are self-explanatory. I think in today's day and age, unfortunately, the media plays out a lot, picks up on the fringe groups and portrays the masses to be the followers of the fringe, which is unfortunately not the case. So without further ado, actually, we'd want to continue on with the program now and have some poetry. If I can have ask Mr. Sayyid Zamir Shibli to please come up and share some poetry with us.
Hello and Assalamu alaikum. Very warm welcome to all of you in this freezing weather. I'm here to recite a poetry, and I will request my daughter, Warda Zamir, to give an English version of this poetry. Okay. ये पहले इसका बता दो तो. Let's read this out. Okay.
Okay, so Assalamu alaikum everyone. What my father is about to recite is basically something that you might have heard by Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. So I'll just read the translation for you so that you can understand as he reads it in Urdu. Basically what this is about is God, and how we should not try to find him in idols. He is in changing nights. He is turning the night into the day and the day into the night. And that is the only God. There is someone running the whole system of existence, and that is the only God. He is not visible, but yet he is apparent in the surrounding, and that is the only God. There is someone running the whole system of existence, and that is the only God. So I'll let you hear it in Urdu in the voice of my father.
Thank you, Warda. I must also thank my friends, those who have come on a very short notice to participate, especially Mr. Nadeem Shah Sahab and Hamid Rashid Sahab and my daughter. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. कोई तो है जो निज़ाम हस्ती चला रहा है, वही खुदा है. कोई तो है जो निज़ाम हस्ती चला रहा है, वही खुदा है. दिखाई भी जो न दे नजर भी जो आ रहा है, वही खुदा है, वही खुदा है, वही खुदा है, वही खुदा है. नजर भी रखे समाते भी, वो जान लेता है नीयतें भी. जो खाने लाशऊर में जगमगा रहा है, वही खुदा है, वही खुदा है, वही खुदा है. तलाश उसको न कर बुतों में, वो है बदलती हुई रुतों में. जो दिन को रात और रात को दिन बना रहा है वही खुदा है वही खुदा है वही खुदा है कोई तो है जो निज़ाम हस्ती चला रहा है वही खुदा है. Excuse me, this was my first time to recite this poetry, and because of the bad throat, I couldn't. इसके साथ इंसाफ नहीं कर सका. Jazakallah. What is next?
I said next time you can do that.
Yes, inshallah. जी. आप उनको वर्दा को बुलाएंगे?
I think after someone else.
Okay.
Can we have another round of applause for the Sayyids? I thought that was done beautifully, and if you guys remember, those of us who were here last time, I think Mr. Sayyids was provided us with some really amazing food. So we'd like to thank you. I still remember what we had. I think some of you know me, and just to tell you my background, I come from a land of multi-faiths, India, a land of Bollywood as well. That's where some of the music comes from. And I can tell you that it's a majority, it's a Hindu-dominated country. And the Sufi songs that are, I think, including the one that was presented, it encompasses the entire Bollywood. In fact, a lot of the movies have that, a lot of the rituals. In fact, if you go, some of the temples will have that, including the ones over here, they have this music. And I think the music is something that transcends into different religions, that unites us. And I think they all have different flavors, and that is a factor that unites us. So thank you, Verda, for having that. I think we are missing some of the choirs we had last year. We were singing along with that, but I think, Verda, thank you. Thank you for an amazing job. I think we'll probably have you one more time if we have some time towards the later half of towards the end of the evening. I think continuing on with the program, I'll like to request someone I happen to know and happen to share my parents with, my sister, Asma Heather Ashraf, that's her name, to come and speak to us about Love Thy Neighbor.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, we just happen to know each other, happen to have spent 20 years of my life with him, and just happen to be following him in whatever he's done, engineering and all that. Just happens. So wanted to start tonight with the greeting of peace, the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May peace be upon each and every one of you here today. I know it's a very chilly evening outside today, and this morning I was with a professor who's coming down from Atlanta, and they had about 2 inches of snow, and it was declared a state of emergency there. So we're a bit stronger of a community. We're able to come out even when we've got 2 inches at least outside already. No state of emergency here. So I'm actually going to be echoing pretty much what's already been said tonight, and most of the speakers that I've heard this evening and who are wiser than me in wisdom and in what they've shared. And I'll be speaking to you on the topic and one of these things that brings us all together. And it's the golden rule that's been said before today. The golden rule being, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. They say if you were to take Christianity and strip it of all theological beliefs and debates, it would come down, the raw essence of the religion would come down to this basic concept of how much you love God and how you show that love for God by loving your neighbor. That's what Christianity comes down to. Let's take a look at another Abrahamic faith, the faith of Judaism. So what does Judaism teach us? And I want to share with you the story of Rabbi Hillel, who was asked to teach the entire Torah. Someone came up to him and said, if you can teach me the entire Torah while I stand here on one foot, I'll believe in your faith. And what did Rabbi Hillel tell that man? He said, what is hateful to yourself, do not do to your fellow man. What is hateful to yourself, do not do to your fellow man. And that is the entire Torah. The rest of it is just commentary. Go and study it. So again, he sums it down to just loving yourself and loving your neighbor. Loving your neighbor as you love yourself. Now let's take a look at Islam. And in the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, in the many Quranic verses we find the similar teachings, but I'll refer to a saying of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him. And this is narrated by Anas, a companion of the Prophet. And he says, by him in whose hands is my soul, no man truly believes until he loves for his neighbor or his brother what he loves for himself. So once again, we're told the exact same message. You do not believe until you love for another as you love for yourself. But what I just shared with you, these are the three Abrahamic faiths, right? Now so what I began to wonder when I was looking into this is what happens, how many religions are there in the world? And doing some quick Googling, I realized that there was about 4,200, approximately 4,200 religions in the world. And of them, I've said, okay, so what's some of the least known religions? There's a list of top 10 least known religions in the world. And one of them was Taoism. So I said, okay, let's see what their fundamental beliefs are. What do these guys believe in? And I went into some of the basic scriptures that they have, and a quote from their scripture reads, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain, and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. Having looked into this, I was like, all right, now I can safely conclude that every single religion in the fundamental basis has this concept of believing, of doing good for others, caring for others, being righteous to your neighbor, giving them their rights. That means we must be living in a very harmonious and a loving world, right? So I said, all right, let's take a look at the world stage today. There's an article in the Huffington Post that had the title, Love Your Neighbor as Yourself, Religious America Gets a Failing Grade. That's something that hit me as, how can we all, most of the world's people have some faith in their heart. How can we, people of faith, how can we as people of faith live in a country or in a place, in a society where we're not looking after each other? And this hit home. And you know what? The author in that article, he cites many facts about the concentration of wealth in society and how the spread of poverty within the nation, and he's speaking of America. And I promise you, if I was to look any further, we'd find similar facts for Canada. For example, 20% of the children in this country are living under the poverty line today. This is people amongst, these are our neighbors. One of the questions that comes up when we're looking at this theme of neighbors, who is our neighbor? Is it the person living next door? So again, we can turn to these scriptures and we can turn to these texts, and you'll find a commonality that in reference to different scenarios, they're referring to neighbors. Sometimes it is the person living next door. For example, when that winter ice storm happened in Toronto, your neighbor was for me, my neighbor was the old elderly lady who lives alone next door. So I did what my obligation was. I went over, I knocked at her doorstep, and I said, hey, is everything okay? I know you don't have power past few days. Do you need anything? And she was like, oh, I'm pretty warm in here. But you know what? I'm worried about the trees that fell in the backyard there. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of worried about the lights not coming back. We'll look after the trees soon. But, you know, we have to take that step and make sure our neighbors are okay. But in other scenarios, our neighbors are the people of Syria and the people in these countries in the world that have no one to help them. The children of Syria who don't have food on their table. Those guys are our neighbors in a global sense. We're living in a very globalized world today where we can talk to anybody in the world. We can be close to anyone in the world in no time at all. So these guys are our neighbors. What I want to do now, having looked at the situation of the world today and recognizing that we are failing to fulfill a fundamental belief of faith, we need to remedy the situation. And I want to turn towards the guidance that we receive from the Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, on how to remedy the situation. So when it comes to caring for our neighbors, I recall the story of Abu Dhar, who was a companion of the Prophet. And he says that the Messenger of Allah tells him, and he says, "O Abu Dhar, whenever you prepare a broth, put plenty of water in it and share some of it with your neighbors." This story is beautiful in the sense that it tells us that we don't need to have a lot. We don't need to be the top 1% of the richest people in the world to be able to give. We can give from what we have. And this is especially true for people in youth like myself. When we feel like, oh, I don't have anything to give, No, I'm sure I have something. I have time. I have something that I can give from. And you find that within you. What is it that you can share with other people? When it comes to caring for our neighbors, another example that we have, we need to be more tolerant as a society, more understanding, more compassionate. So let's again turn to the life of the Prophet. What do we learn from there? There was a neighbor of the Prophet who was very persistent on irritating him and annoying him, to the extent that she would throw garbage in his path every single day. It became a routine. He would step out and there would be garbage outside his door. To the extent, one day he comes out and there's no garbage outside. What does he do? He inquires about her. He asks people what happened to her. Why is there no garbage on my doorstep today? And he finds out that she's ill. So he goes to her place and he asks of her well-being, and he asks her, is there anything I can do to help you? And after hearing this, she's humbled and she's ashamed of the things she's done, and she just falls in awe of him. And you know what? I know we can't I know myself as a person, I can't be of that stature, but I can strive towards, and I can remind myself that that's who I can strive towards. Those are examples for us. Lastly, I'll leave you with some simple ways, very simple things that we can do to implement this sense of harmony, this sense of compassion, this sense of tolerance within our own communities. Or as the Jewish scripture says, tzedakah, or charity. Even in Arabic you hear the word sadaqah. So some ways of doing this, simple things, in joining in good. When someone is doing a righteous deed, join them. Forbidding evil. So if you see something that is against, speak up against it. If you can't, at least step away from it so you're not a part of it. Removing harm from the road, a simple thing. If there's an object that can harm someone else, take it away from the path. Listening to the deaf, leading the blind. These are prophetic guidance that I'm sharing with you. Guiding one to the object of his need. Hurrying the strength of one's legs to one in sorrow who is asking for help. Supporting the feeble with the strength of one's arms. And lastly, something that John had just shared with us, the simplest form, just smile, because that goes a long way and that can change a person's day. Thank you.
Thank you, Asma. I think it's beautiful words, and I hope, again, we're continuing on with the tradition that John started this evening. We are able to implement some of this as we go out of these doors into our lives. We are coming towards the end of the evening. Unfortunately, Mr. Zul Kasmali, who's the president, is not able to make it. I knew he was trying to get here, and he was coming from out of town, but we all are aware now what the weather is like outside. So unfortunately, he's not be able to be with us. So we'd like to conclude tonight's program, and if I can ask Mr. Mushtaq Khan to please come up again and share the last few words in vote of thanks, please.
Thank you very much. I hope that we had a wonderful evening. I would like to thank all of you for coming to this event, even with this bad weather we are having, and making it success. Especially, I would like to thank John and some other guests that who have come all the way from far away and came to attend this gathering. I also want to recognize our volunteers, because we had nearly 2 hours today where we have put everything. We have wrapped up the hall, the carpets, and we have put this backdrop on chairs. So some of our really volunteers, they have worked very, very hard to make it possible in 2 hours. So I would like that. Okay, please have a round of applause for everybody. I hope that next year's event will be more successful than this, and we should try our best to bring all the faiths together wherever we can, and especially let's smile when we see each other. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
I think that pretty much brings an end to the formal part of the evening. I'd like to just end with a quote from the Bible that sums up, I guess, the program that we have decided, and the Harmony Week. there. And it's from Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 to 14. In the Bible it says, "Put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other. As the Lord has forgiven you, so you must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony." I think as we close this evening, we go back to our houses, our lives, our jobs, our schools. Let's keep the smile on, as that has been the theme of the evening, smiling at each other. I'd like to actually recognize some of these youngsters. It's awesome to see you guys. So big round of applause for these guys in the front there. I hope you enjoyed something and learned. I think these are the future generations and who have to hold the beacon, and go on. So it's glad that you're coming out at this age. So I hope you enjoyed some of it. And let's. I think I haven't had a chance to try out the samosas and the jalebis. If you guys haven't, let's try those out and get to know one another. And I'd like to meet some of you guys as well. Thank you once again. Have a wonderful evening and a safe drive back.